The Trumpet Daily from Jerusalem.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Trumpet Daily. Who will win the war in Syria? That's the question that many are asking in this part of the world. Will Bashar Assad survive and keep Syria aligned with Iran? Or will Islamic rebels take control of the nation, much like they did in Libya and Egypt? Since the civil war in Syria began just 2 years ago, tens of thousands of people have been slaughtered. Hundreds of thousands more have sought refuge in Turkey and Jordan. And the ever-widening conflict has now drawn in a dangerous mix of major world powers: Germany and the European Union, Russia, Iran, the Gulf states. It's a high-stakes conflict that will soon realign power blocks here in the Middle East. In fact, what's happening in Syria is actually setting the stage for a larger conflict that will lead right into World War III. Few people realize that the Bible actually reveals the astonishing truth about Syria's role in the climactic events to occur just before the return of Jesus Christ. Now, the conflict in Syria began back in March 2011 with just street protests, started in Damascus and Aleppo and Dara. But within a few months, these demonstrations had escalated into full-scale civil war. On the one side, you have Bashar Assad's regime, which is backed by Russia and Iran. And then on the other side, you have the rebel forces, which consist of a volatile mix of numerous factions, many of them having ties to radical Islam. The rebel forces are backed by Europe and Turkey and the Sunni Gulf states. And then, of course, you have the weakness of America, which is being advertised daily throughout the region. Just a few years ago, America had a powerful presence in Iraq, which, of course, is situated right between Syria and Iran. When President Obama came into office back in 2009, Al-Qaeda was basically on the run in Iraq, and U.S. casualties in the country had reached a low point. Let me just quote to you what Charles Krauthammer wrote on June 20th. He said, "We had a golden opportunity to reap the rewards of this too bloody war by establishing a strategic relationship with an Iraq that was still under American sway." He says Iraqi airspace, for example, was under U.S. control as we prepared to advise and rebuild Iraq's non-existent Air Force. He said, with our evacuation, however, Iraqi airspace today effectively belongs to Iran, over which it is flying weapons, troops, and advisors to turn the tide in Syria. The U.S. air bases, the vast military equipment, the intelligence sources available in Iraq were all abandoned gratis. Now we're trying to hold the line in Jordan. Think about that. America's trying to establish a small military presence in Jordan, of all places, just to maintain some kind of influence in the region. But the reality is, U.S. influence is gone. And that's why we see other world powers scrambling for control of this region. They're just filling the vacuum that's been left by the United States. Let's look at Daniel 11 and verse 40. This is a prophecy that we've taken you to many, many times over the years. Now, the Bible not only prophesies of America's decline and departure from the Middle East, it describes in great detail, as I said a moment ago, how that vacuum is being filled. Daniel 11 and verse 40, it says, "And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over." Now, we've told you before about these two kings that clash in this end time. It's going to involve the king of the north, which is the German-led European Union, or a combination of 10 nations in Europe. And they'll clash with the king of the south, which is Iran and its allies in the Middle East. The Bible says Iran will aggressively push, that's the word used here, push at Europe, and then Germany will retaliate forcefully against this Islamic push and enter into Jerusalem, this city behind me. Now that's what's coming. And if you look closely at the Syrian conflict today, you can see the early stages of this friction between these two prophesied kings and their allies. That's what's important here. Now, many people don't yet see the dominant role that Germany is playing in this region. Even the Iranians do not yet see how Germany is actually surrounding them. But Germany has military footholds popping up all over this region, as we've been reporting at thetrumpet.com. Daniel's prophecy here reveals that it's only a matter of time before Germany crushes radical Islam. It will happen, and it will happen suddenly, and it's going to shock this world. Continue in verse 41. It says, he shall enter also into the glorious land. That's this land we're presenting this program from today. And many countries shall be overthrown, it says, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. It says, he shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. So this king of the north power stretches forth its hand, and it says even Egypt won't escape its wrath. So when the German-led European Union comes against this Iranian-led Islamic Union, Egypt is not going to escape. Egypt's going to be conquered along with Iran. And of course, as you know, if you've followed us for any time, it's because of this prophecy that for 2 decades we told you that Egypt would eventually swing into the Iranian camp. That has now happened. Never mind the latest upheaval in Cairo. Once the dust settles from this most recent clash between the Brotherhood and the Egyptian military, Egypt's alliance with Iran will remain intact. In fact, it's only going to get stronger. Bible prophecy tells us that. Continue in verse 43. It says, but he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, it says, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. And so Libya and Ethiopia are also prophesied to swing into this radical Islamist camp. It's already happened in Libya, and you can watch for it to follow soon in Ethiopia. Now, let's put this prophecy in Daniel 11 together with another one over in the Psalms, Psalm 83. Psalm 83 reveals, it adds some details to this prophecy. It reveals that when Europe comes against the king of the south, the Middle East at that point will be divided very clearly into 2 power blocks. Those nations that back Iran, and then those nations in this region that resist against Iranian dominance. Now, this is why the civil war in Syria is so prophetically significant, because like Egypt, Syria is a hot point. It's a trigger point that's going to trigger a dramatic realignment of strategic alliances in this region. Now, according to Psalm 83, Syria is actually prophesied to move into the power block that opposes Iran. Now, as we know, historically, of course, Syria has had very close ties with Iran, but that will eventually change. Let me read to you this prophecy in Psalm 83, beginning in verse 5. It says, for they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against you. So here is a confederate group of nations. It says, the tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites. So you have to put this together, these names, some of them with history. The Ishmaelites is referring to the people that settled primarily into Saudi Arabia. It says the people of Moab, which refers to Jordan. And then it mentions there the Hagarenes. Now, anciently, the Hagarenes were people that lived in the region that is Syria today. And then it goes on to list a bunch of others. Gebal, which is in Lebanon, and then Ammon, which again refers to Jordan, and Amalek. The Philistines, that refers to the region down where the Gaza Strip is, or the Hamas organization. with the inhabitants of Tyre. That's back up in Lebanon. And then finally it says, and Asher also is joined with them. They have holpen, the children of Lot, it says, Selah. So Asher is together with all of these nations that resist against Iranian dominance. Asher, of course, refers to ancient Assyria, which is today modern-day Germany. Now, there may be a little bit of overlap with some of these nationalities listed in Psalm 83, but if you know, as I said earlier, if you know a bit of history, you can piece together a lot from this passage. This psalm is describing an alliance that has never occurred in history. Commentators will tell you that. It's an alliance prophesied to form in our day. It's telling us which nations will ally with Germany when that German-led European Union comes against the king of the south. Now, if Syria is prophesied to ally with Germany when it comes against Iran, then that means there must be a distinct break in that Syrian-Iranian alliance before the clash of Daniel 11. Now, in looking at the situation in Syria maybe a few years ago, it would have been easy to scoff at the notion of Syria breaking its ties with Iran and then allying with Germany. But when you look at the situation today, it no longer seems so far-fetched. Just the other day, Reuters reported that Taliban fighters from Pakistan were heading for Syria to join the rebel forces in their fight against the Assad regime. Let me just read to you what that Reuters report said. It said, more than 2 years since the start of the anti-Assad rebellion, Syria has become a magnet for foreign Sunni fighters who have flocked to the Middle Eastern nation to join what they see as a holy war against Shiite oppressors. Reuters says, operating alongside militant groups such as the al-Nusra Front, described by the United States as a branch of al-Qaeda, they mainly come from nearby countries such as Libya and Tunisia, riven by similar conflict as a result of the Arab Spring. So you can see the Sunnis rushing to the rebel forces' aid so that they can fight against Assad. There's a dramatic realignment happening here. It's happening right now in the Middle East. And the astonishing thing is, the Bible prophesied all of this in great detail. Now remember when we told you years ago about Iraq and how it would eventually fall to Iran? I just read to you that quote from Charles Krauthammer, who said that Iraqi airspace effectively belongs to who? We're gone. America's gone. That airspace belongs to Iran. And they're flying right over Iraq and delivering all kinds of weapons and such to Syria. So Iraq's already fallen to Iran. I mean, the U.S. basically took care of the dirty work for Iran and then handed Iraq over to it on a silver platter. That's happened, and we told you about it years ago in advance. We told you about Egypt. We told you about their radical swing into the Iranian camp. That's happened. We told you about what would happen in Libya. Now you watch for Syria to break with Iran next as these nations settle into that Psalm 83, Daniel 11 prophesied alliances, those two power blocks, as I said. Now we might not know every single detail about how the break will happen or when Assad will fall or who takes over thereafter, but you can be sure that that tie will be severed from Iran as it shifts more into the Sunni camp with Saudi Arabia and the others. It's going to happen. Just understanding Psalm 83 and Daniel 11, we can look beyond the current chaos in Syria, and it is chaotic up there. We can look beyond it and know how this bloody conflict will end. Today, Syria is a bloodbath. Nearly 100,000 people have been killed. There's over 1.3 million refugees and thousands more that are crossing borders illegally. Yet as bad as it is, it's only the beginning. This situation is about to explode. As I said, this regional conflict, which is what it started as, is drawing in this dangerous mix of other world powers, and it will soon explode. Now, the same prophecies that tell us about the two Middle Eastern power blocs, also that forecast about Syria's break with Iran, these same prophecies also tell us that the emerging German-led European empire is about to wreak unprecedented destruction on the world, not just the region of Iran, but the world. The thing is, it just begins here in this region after the smash against that radical Islamic force, and then those European armies settle into the region around Jerusalem, and then from there we launch into the Great Tribulation. As I said, unprecedented destruction. You can read about that in Matthew 24 and see what Jesus himself said about these latter days. It's going to spread. Now, thank God, the suffering will only go on for a few years after that clash in Daniel 11. Prophecy tells us that when the clash of Daniel 11 happens, the Messiah will return 3.5 years later. So it brings us that much closer to the return of Jesus Christ. Now, for much more about these soon coming prophesied events, request Germany and the Holy Roman Empire, and also our booklet, The King of the South. Study these works, study them, and take heart that despite the confusion of today, there is an incredible final outcome for all of mankind. Christ will return to stop it, to stop the warring governments of men, and to set up a righteous government that will bring peace and joy to all of mankind. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again next time.